I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're delving into the thought-provoking novel, The Half-Life of Secrets. It's written by an amazing author. Her name is Holland, Childhouse. This poignant story follows Olivia, a sharp-witted woman confronting her own mortality as she battles leukemia. With a blend of humor, insight, and raw honesty, the author explores life's most profound questions, making this a captivating and unforgettable read. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at City of Books for helping us put her in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like her by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing her amazing book. The links are below this interview. Holly, thank you so much for joining me here today on Spotlight.
Well, you make the book sound absolutely wonderful. I must read it. Uh,
Well,
it's
it is wonderful, so you should read it.
well, thank you.
Of course, you did write it,
I
so
did.
kudos go to you. Um, is it based on real life experience? Tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind it.
Well, I am a writer by nature, and that happens sort of organically. But a lot of people asked me why I wanted to write a book about death, and I said, well, uh, everybody's story eventually ends with a chapter on death, so it seems fairly normal to me that you would want to talk about it. And so I had been, I was involved in seeing a woman who was close to me dying. And it struck me, it was a very protracted illness. And I watched her, and she seemed to be losing her senses one at a time. And this kicked me back to my college days in the 60s. That's how old I am. And I remembered reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and it spent a lot of time talking about the dissolution of the five senses one at a time. And I thought, well, that's an interesting concept. Why not apply it to life instead of death? Why not have a character that you look at through the lens of these five senses, as we all live through them ourselves, and apply it to someone in a story? So that's where I got the idea. And then I thought, well, that sounds rather erudite and a little bit too uh, uh, just too pedantic. And so maybe I need to do something more exciting. How about, why don't we attach a death to each one of the senses? And I thought, well, that's a good idea. Who doesn't love a fictional murder, you know? So then I had the challenge of having to come up with a death associated with each one of the senses. So I thought I'd start easy. Taste was pretty easy. I thought, well, why don't I just have poor old Nelson choke on a chicken bone, or actually, I think it was a fish bone. And these poor women apparently had never heard of the Heimlich. So that was the end of Nelson. And that was a pretty simple one. Then we moved on to smell. And I thought, well, lots of things could be affected by your sense of smell. And carbon monoxide came to me. And once again, I had a character that really wasn't very much in touch with the real world. So she ended up, getting carbon monoxide poisoning, and off she went. And then we come to touch. And I thought, what can I do with that? And I had just recently read an article about an Australian woman who went swimming in the ocean and swam into a school of box jellyfish. And that was the end of her. So
Terrible way to go.
I decided to usurp her idea. So that became touch. Then I was very challenged by sight. And I eventually came up with the idea of this laser that brings down the plane that her poor husband is in. And it's probably the weakest of the four conceits, really. But then I came to hearing, and it struck me that sometimes hearing is sometimes you can hear something that is so catastrophic that it can push you over the edge. And Olivia was pretty close to the edge as it was. So it wasn't too hard to push her over. And hearing about her betrayal was the way I dealt with the hearing. And it's interesting because the publishers of the book wanted to do a treatment for a movie. And they sent me the text to read. And I noticed that they had left out the five deaths. And I said, you can't leave out the deaths because that's actually the heart of the book. If you don't have the deaths, then you don't have the tension between the mother and son, where he blames her for the daughter's death and he blames her for his father's death, even though she was really only tangential to these deaths. But he, blaming the universe didn't work for him, so he wanted to blame his mother. And Olivia is saddled with these deaths that she really didn't participate in, but it hangs over her whole life, and she has this amorphous guilt about it. So without the deaths, you really don't have much of a storyline. So that's how all of that evolved.
Amazing, amazing. Talk to me about the title, The Half-Life of Secrets. What does that mean? How did you come up with it?
I have no idea what that means. Uh,
Just an intriguing headline to get people's attention.
yeah, I originally called it Thin Blood
Mhm.
because I thought, people always say that blood is thicker than water. Um, and I thought Thin Blood was sort of interesting because it pared it down. But we ended up changing it for a variety of reasons. I think that secrets is at the base of this story because you have a lot of secretiveness going on in all of the characters. And I enjoy, it's not an autobiographical book by any means, but I enjoyed putting a few things in there that are sort of personal to me. For example, I have an estate lawyer in there, and I've always been intrigued by the fact that uh, when somebody dies, whether their estate is worth $2 or $2 billion, people lose their minds, and not just because of the mourning, but because of what looks like a money issue, but it's actually deeper than money issues. If you have three siblings, for example, and the father dies and leaves differing amounts to the three siblings, granted, they will all fight over the money, but it's not just the money, it's also the affection. They feel that if one was given more money, that was an example of the father loving that one more. And so there's a lot of deep emotional things that go on, after a death. And then I also amused myself by throwing in, there's a section where uh, this fellow Nelson, who's really a terrible character, um, he buys a couple of shares of Berkshire Hathaway stock. And I did look this up because I've always followed Berkshire Hathaway Class A. It's not that I own any, it's just that I followed it. And when it first came out, it was you could buy it for $7.50. And in today's market, it's worth $658,000 per share. So if you bought just a few shares, you were, a millionaire. And so I threw that in just because I thought it was fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of great elements to this book that makes it intriguing, makes it humorous at times as well. What do you hope readers take away from Olivia's perspective on life and death?
Mhm. Well, certainly I think she has a very good attitude towards life. Uh, as you mentioned, she has a quick wit, which she sort of developed without any of my help, I think. It just sort of happened. Uh, she reminds me very much, I've been watching a soap opera for 30 years, General Hospital. And there's a character on General Hospital named Tracy Quartermain, played brilliantly by Jane Elliott. And she's a very tough, edgy woman, but very admirable in other ways. And Olivia, I felt, always lived up to her potential as somebody who's very authentic and stayed true to herself, despite all of the angst that she had to endure and the false accusations in many cases. And in the end, she sort of forgives everybody, everything, which I think is something we should all do, and tries hard to reconcile with her son, who was in the wrong. Uh, that's what I think.
Some wonderful lessons about life and death in this book, no doubt, and the way to live your life and what we lose towards the end of our lives. The name of the book is The Half-Life of Secrets. It is a poignant story that follows Olivia, a sharp-witted woman confronting her own mortality as she battles leukemia. With a blend of humor, insight, and raw honesty, the author explores life's most profound questions, making this a captivating and unforgettable read. Holly, thank you so much for joining me here today on Spotlight.
Well, thank you, Logan. I really appreciate the time. Thank you very
I,
much.
I appreciate your time as well, your wit, your wisdom, and your insight. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time, this time until next time on Spotlight.